A creeping shadow threatens to swallow the world. In a quiet village, a young lore keeper named Lyra makes a choice that will define her life. She must leave everything she knows behind to find the lost Sunstone, a legendary relic of pure light. Her quest is to restore balance to a land being consumed by an unnatural gloom. The path ahead is woven with forgotten magic and ancient challenges that test the very limits of courage. By the end of her story, you will understand how a single spark of hope can illuminate the deepest darkness, what forgotten truths lie hidden in the shadowed lands, and is Lyra truly the one destined to find them? I wonder where you are listening from right now and what the local time is for you. Feel free to share that in the comments as we begin this journey together. What part of a great quest do you think demands the most courage? The weight of the village elder's lantern felt immense in Lyra's hands, a small beacon against the enormity of her task. She spent her final night tracing the faded routes on her ancestral maps, lines drawn by hands from a time long past. Each path was a story of its own, a legacy of watching and waiting that now fell squarely on her shoulders. Her small home, once a sanctuary of familiar sounds and scents, now seemed to press in on her, its walls a comfort she had to willingly leave behind. Whispers followed her through the evening, a mixture of blessings and hushed concerns from the villagers she had known all her life. Their hope was a fragile thing, and their worry was a mirror to her own. Could someone who trembled at the mere thought of the deep woods truly carry the light they all needed? The doubt was a cold stone in her chest, a voice insisting she was just a keeper of tales, not a maker of legends. But the sight of families huddled a little closer as the daylight faded cemented her resolve. To ask anyone to join her would be to lead them into a challenge she could not even measure, a weight her heart refused to share. The elder's final words echoed the new urgency. The shadow was not merely creeping anymore, it was reaching, its gloom threatening to touch the neighboring hamlets by the next moon. As the first pale light of dawn touched the eastern hills, Lyra shouldered her pack and walked past the last familiar fence post. The air grew thick and silent the moment she crossed into the whispering woods, the world behind her fading into a memory as the shadows at her feet began to stir with a life of their own. The forest floor was a tangle of roots that seemed to shift when she was not looking. Lyra moved forward one careful step at a time, her eyes fixed on the faint, silvery trail that shimmered just ahead. It was the path of ancient light, a magic so old it was woven into the very soil, and it was her only guide. Shadow-touched vines, slick and dark, uncurled from the undergrowth, reaching for her ankles with a slow, deliberate intent. She danced between them, her heart hammering against her ribs, each near miss a lesson in vigilance. The woods were not just a place, they were a living, breathing challenge designed to turn travelers back. Strange whispers wove through the rustling leaves, not words but feelings, echoes of her own deepest doubts. "You are just a lore keeper," they seemed to sigh. "You are not the hero from the tales." The path ahead would shimmer and then fork, presenting illusions of safety that she knew, from her studies, led only to endless circles. She closed her eyes for a moment, fighting the disorientation. Sight was a liar here. She had to trust what she knew, not what she saw. Reaching into her pack, she lifted the elder's lantern. Its flame, though small, did not flicker in the unnatural breeze. It cast a steady, golden pool around her, and where that light fell, the shimmering path on the ground grew a little brighter, a little more solid. This was the choice, a simple but profound act of faith. She would trust the gentle, persistent light of the old magic over the screaming certainty of her own fear. And in that moment of decision, the very air of the forest seemed to change. The magical pressure intensified, the whispers gaining a new, sharp-edged focus. It was no longer just a test of the woods. Something was watching her now, something vast and aware that had taken note of the little light, daring to challenge the gloom. With a final surge of will, Lyra pushed through a wall of thorny thicket, the branches scraping at her arms, and then she was through. The oppressive weight of the woods fell away, replaced by the cool, open air of a moonlit clearing. Before her, silhouetted against a blanket of stars, stood the silent, broken stones of an ancient watchtower. The broken stones of the watchtower rose around her like ancient, sleeping giants. Lyra stepped cautiously across the threshold, her lantern casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. In the center of the main chamber, the floor was a masterpiece of forgotten artistry, a mosaic crafted from colored stone and chips of luminous crystal. It depicted a brilliant sphere of light, the Sunstone, being forged in a heart of a celestial fire by figures with stars for eyes. But her breath caught as she traced the story further. A creeping stain of dark tiles, a shadow born from a place of absence, was shown reaching for the light, its tendrils threatening to smother the world. And there, standing between the shadow and the stone, was a single, small figure holding a tiny, unwavering flame. The forgotten prophecy called this figure the Keeper of Dawn. The weight of that title settled on her, a mantle far heavier than her pack. This was not a simple quest for a lost object. It was a cycle, a conflict that had challenged the world before, and the shadow was an intelligent, ancient presence that learned from each return. Her own doubts now felt like a childish fear in the face of such a legacy. Could she, who still heard the forest's whispers in her mind, truly be the one to stand where that mosaic figure stood? The prophecy itself was a riddle, a series of interlocking symbols representing not a location, but a state of being. To find the Sunstone, she would first have to become the keeper the prophecy described. With a final deep breath, Lyra knelt, her fingers hovering just above the ancient artwork. She committed every curve and symbol to memory, tracing the paths of light and the shapes of the shadow until they were etched behind her eyes. This knowledge was now her most vital tool, more important than any map. The stakes were no longer just about restoring light to her village. The mosaic showed the shadow's ultimate goal, a final, enduring night where no flame, no matter how small, would ever flicker again. This was about the survival of light itself. As she stepped back out into the clearing, the cool night air felt different on her skin, charged with a new and solemn purpose. And then she saw it, far in the distance, nestled between two dark peaks. A single soft light pulsed gently, like a heartbeat. It was a silent, beckoning guide, pointing her way toward the deep and mysterious Valley of Echoes. The path into the Valley of Echoes felt like stepping into a different world entirely. Each footfall, no matter how softly placed, rippled outward into a cascade of sound. The rustle of her cloak became a chorus of whispers, and the simple beat of her own heart thrummed in the air like a distant, steady drum. It was a place where quiet was forbidden, and every breath was magnified into a windstorm of noise. Shadowy, half-formed illusions flickered at the edges of her vision, born from the distorted sounds, luring her toward sheer drops, disguised as gentle slopes. A sense of urgency began to coil in her chest, its own echo threatening to drown out her thoughts. She knew she could not outrun the sound, so she had to become an anchor within it. Closing her eyes, she focused on the one thing the valley could not create on its own, a steady and calm intention. She drew a slow, deep breath, and then another, forcing her body to settle into a rhythm that defied the chaos. Into that carefully crafted quiet, she began to hum. It was an old, simple melody, one her grandmother had sung to soothe night terrors. The tune was a thread of pure memory, a vibration of comfort and safety that the distorting magic could not touch. She poured her focus into that single, soft sound, making it her true path through the valley. As she walked, the valley's magic seemed to recognize the challenge. The echoes intensified, twisting her humming into dissonant versions of itself. The shadow was here, she realized, not as a physical beast, but as a pervasive influence, actively seeking to break her concentration. This was not a passive environment, it was a sentient gauntlet. Each step taken without faltering, each note hummed true, was a victory. The realization that she was actively resisting the shadow's influence and winning sent a surge of quiet confidence through her that was stronger than any echo. The disorienting noise began to recede, fading from a roar to a murmur, and then to nothing more than the natural sounds of the night. She had passed the test. Stepping from the valley's mouth, the world fell into a profound and gentle silence. The path sloped downward into a starlit grove, where the air was still and fragrant with night-blooming flowers. And there, standing motionless amidst the soft grass and bathed in the light of the moons, was a figure of weathered stone, a silent, ancient guardian waiting for her approach. The stone guardian was immense, its form shaped from the living rock of the grove, and it did not move as Lyra approached. It simply was, a silent sentinel with eyes that were deep, empty spaces. A low pedestal stood before it, set with a series of crystal fragments that lay dark and scattered. As she drew near, the guardian's head tilted down with a soft grinding sound, its stony gaze fixing on her. The message was clear. This was a gate that would not open by force. Her heart beat a quick rhythm against her ribs, but the memory of the valley's chaotic echoes was still fresh. She would not be rushed. She studied the pedestal, her fingers tracing the faint grooves that connected the crystal slots. This was a circuit, a riverbed waiting for light to flow. The crystals themselves were not inert. They hummed with a potential energy she could feel in the air. A wrong alignment, she sensed, would not simply fail. It would trigger the Guardian's protective magic, sealing this path for good or turning the peaceful grove into a place of confinement. This was a test of intelligence and patience, a challenge to her worthiness. She closed her eyes for a moment, pushing back the urge to simply try combinations at random. She recalled the patterns from the Watchtower mosaic, the specific angles and connections of the celestial fire. This puzzle was an echo of that greater design. With a calm she had to consciously build, she began moving the crystals, one by one, into the grooves. Each correct placement was rewarded with a soft chime, and a faint thread of light would pulse along the carved channel. The final crystal was the key. It fit into the central slot with a resonant click, and a completed web of pure, white light flared across the pedestal. The light traveled up the guardian's stone arm, filling its empty eyes with a gentle, radiant glow. The great statue shifted, not with menace, but with a slow, deliberate purpose. It reached toward her, its massive hand uncurling to reveal a single, luminous shard that pulsed with a warm, inner light. This was a gift, a piece of the old magic itself. As Lyra carefully took it, the shard flared in her palm and then drifted toward her lantern, merging with the flame inside. The light within the glass swelled, no longer a small, steady flame, but a brilliant miniature sun that cast deep, confident shadows and made the entire grove feel safe and known. The Guardian's trust was earned, and its activation was a profound confirmation. She was not alone in this. Ancient powers sleeping in the world were still aligned with the light and could be awakened. But this also meant the challenges ahead would be guarded by even stronger, more complex wards. The path before her, once shrouded, now gleamed as if starlight had been woven into the soil itself, leading her gaze toward a dark split in the mountainside, the entrance to the quiet Cavern of Whispers. The entrance to the Cavern of Whispers swallowed all light and sound. Lyra stepped inside, the brilliance of her enhanced lantern pushing back the absolute blackness to reveal walls that seemed to drink the light, leaving only a small, precious pool of illumination around her feet. Almost immediately, the whispers began. They were not the chaotic echoes of the valley, but distinct, layered voices, a chorus of the past speaking directly into her mind. Some were gentle guides, murmuring of a loose stone ahead or a hidden crevice to her right. Others were mournful, heavy with the memory of those who had come before her, lore keepers who had faltered and faded in this very darkness. Their stories were a solemn reminder, a history of hope grown quiet. One voice, sharp and cold, insisted the Sunstone was a myth, that its last location was a void, a place of pure stillness. Lyra felt the words like a physical chill, a temptation to simply sit down and let the shadows settle, as they had for so many others. This was the cavern's true nature, she realized with a jolt. It did not just create gloom, it actively clouded memory and dimmed hope, turning the past into a barrier against the future. Her internal journey was as perilous as the cavern itself. A misstep could trigger a cascade of falling stones, and a sudden, bright flash of her lantern risked awakening slumbering rock formations that threatened to block the path entirely. She had to move with the silence and control of a falling leaf. Drawing a slow, steadying breath, she made a choice. She would not silence the whispers, but she would listen with new discernment. She tuned out the voices of stillness, the ones that spoke only of endings, and focused on the softer, persistent voices that still held a fragment of warmth, the ones that spoke of a brilliant light hidden in a place beyond sorrow. These hopeful whispers began to weave together, offering fragmented clues about a high, hidden chamber where the last keeper of dawn had made a final stand. The path was not on any map, but was a way of the heart, a route forged by unwavering belief. This forgotten knowledge was her true compass. Trusting the hopeful guidance, she navigated a narrow ledge over a deep, unseen chasm, her movements fluid and silent. The cavern was testing more than her courage. It was testing her capacity to choose hope as an active, deliberate force. As she pressed deeper, the air, which had been still and cold, began to shift. A gentle, warm draft flowed from a passage ahead, carrying with it the faint, sweet scent of sun-warmed stone. It was a promise, an invitation from the world beyond the cavern's grasp, pulling her toward the next stage of her journey. The warm draft led her into a sun-dappled glade, a hidden sanctuary untouched by the creeping gloom. In its center lay a series of still, crystal-clear pools, their surfaces shimmering with captured light. Drawn by a gentle pull, Lyra knelt beside the first one. As her reflection cleared, it was not her own face she saw, but a vision of her village from a time before the shadow. Children laughed, chasing fireflies in a twilight that was gentle, not fearful. Families gathered around crackling hearths, their faces illuminated by a warm, communal light that had nothing to do with flame. The sheer, vibrant joy of the memory was a deep feeling in her chest. Each pool offered a different window into a world she had almost forgotten. She saw festivals where lanterns were released into a starry sky, their ascent a celebration of hope. She saw artisans crafting beautiful things under the full light of a generous sun. The contrast with the quiet, worried community she had left behind was a stark and poignant reminder of what was at stake. A deep longing to simply step into one of those visions, to live again in that untroubled past, washed over her. It was a seductive whisper, offering a comfort far easier than the difficult road ahead. But to lose herself in nostalgia would be its own kind of failure, a silent surrender to the very shadow that sought to erase these memories. The Glade was not just a place of remembrance, it was a final test of her purpose. With a deliberate breath, Lyra made her choice. She would not dwell on what was gone. Instead, she would let the warmth of those joyful moments sink into her spirit, letting them become a wellspring of strength. She was not fighting for a vague concept of light, but for the specific laughter of those children, for the safety of those family hearths. Her resolve hardened, no longer a fragile hope, but a tempered conviction. The final pool did not show a scene of community, but a single, powerful moment. A figure cloaked in light, the last keeper of dawn, was shown not hiding the Sunstone in fear, but placing it within a heart of stone with a sense of solemn purpose. The vision carried a quiet understanding. The relic was concealed to wait. It was waiting for a specific individual, one whose heart had been tested by memory and still chose to look forward. The personal stakes were now immense. This was not a random treasure hunt. The fate of the light was intertwined with her own inner worth. As the visions gently faded from the water, leaving only the reflection of the clear blue sky above, the glade seemed to acknowledge her decision. A path of softly glowing moss awakened at her feet, its gentle light pulsing in a slow, steady rhythm. It wound its way out of the tranquil clearing, pointing unmistakably toward a deep, mist-shrouded gorge, where the air itself seemed to swallow the light. The way forward led to the Bridge of Shadows. The Bridge of Shadows was a slender thread of stone, arching over an abyss of absolute darkness. As Lyra stepped onto its ancient surface, the world seemed to fall away, leaving only the narrow path and the whispering void below. Instantly, shadowy tendrils, cold and slick, coiled up from the chasm, not to touch her physically, but to weave a tapestry of her deepest fears directly in the air before her. She saw visions of her village shrouded in permanent night, heard the fading voices of those she loved, calling her name in despair. One particularly sharp illusion showed her own hands, empty and dark, the lantern extinguished forever at her feet. Each image was a targeted assault, a psychological weapon designed to shatter her resolve and convince her to turn back. The very stones of the bridge trembled violently with each step she took, a physical echo of the shadow's rage at her persistence. It knew she was close, and its final defenses were a symphony of terror. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat pleading for retreat, but her mind held firm. She made a conscious, deliberate choice. She would not run. She would not fight the illusions. She would simply acknowledge their presence and then let them pass like clouds. Fixing her gaze on the brilliant, steady flame within her lantern, she focused all her attention on the small, warm circle of light it cast around her feet. This was her reality. This was her truth. She walked slowly, methodically, her breath a quiet rhythm against the cacophony of fear. Each step forward was a quiet victory, a declaration that her courage was stronger than any phantom the shadow could conjure. With every footfall, the trembling of the bridge lessened, as if her unwavering focus was actively calming the magic itself. She was not just crossing a chasm, she was dismantling the shadow's power over her mind. Stepping onto the solid ground of the far side, the oppressive pressure vanished, replaced by a profound and chilling silence. The air grew still and cold, carrying the scent of ancient stone and undisturbed dust. Ahead, shrouded in a silvery, clinging mist, stood the arched entrance to a sanctuary, its outline promising the end of one journey and the daunting beginning of another. The sanctuary stood before her, a perfect circle of ancient, moss-covered stone, veiled in silver mist. Its arched door, seamless and imposing, was carved with a single, flowing line of text that seemed to pulse with a soft inner light. Lyra ran her fingers over the cool, smooth surface, feeling the weight of the words as she read them aloud. I am born of light, yet dwell in shadow. I am sought by many, but found by one. The riddle was a final, elegant lock, a challenge not of strength, but of spirit. It demanded she look inward, to the very core of what had driven her through the whispering woods and across the bridge of fear. The answer could not be found in any of her old scrolls. It had to be pulled from the heart of her own journey. She thought of the small flame in her lantern, a light born in a world of encroaching gloom. She remembered the choice in the Glade, to embrace memory not as an escape, but as fuel for the path ahead. That was the truth of it. The thing born of light that chose to live in shadow was not a physical object, but a state of being. It was the quiet, stubborn decision to believe in dawn while standing in the deepest part of the night. With a calm certainty that settled deep in her bones, she spoke the word into the still air. Hope. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a deep, resonant sound like a mountain sighing, the seamless stone door split down the middle. The two halves slid silently into the walls, revealing the chamber within. A wave of ancient, potent energy washed over her, warm and humming with power. A stark contrast to the gathering cold she could feel pressing at her back. The shadow was not idle. It knew she was here, and it was marshaling its forces, its presence a growing pressure against the sanctuary's ancient wards. Stepping across the threshold felt like entering a different age. The air itself was thick with latent magic, shimmering with the echoes of all the keepers who had come before. And there, in the exact center of the circular chamber, resting on a simple pedestal of pure white quartz, was the Sunstone. It glowed with a soft, steady light, not blinding, but profound, illuminating the entire room with the gentle warmth of a perfect sunrise. The final stage of her quest lay just a few steps away, but the true challenge, she sensed, was only now beginning. The Sunstone's glow seemed to breathe, a gentle pulse that called to her. Lyra crossed the chamber, her footsteps silent on the ancient floor, and without hesitation, she reached out, placing both hands upon the warm, smooth surface. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then a brilliant, pure light erupted from the stone, not harsh or blinding, but a wave of profound warmth that washed through the sanctuary, filling every corner and pushing the clinging shadows back to the very walls. In that moment, a deep and unmistakable connection snapped into place, a silent recognition that flowed from the stone into her very spirit. It knew her, and it welcomed her. But with that connection came a staggering weight, the immense responsibility of wielding a power that could either heal the world or bring great change. A cold thread of fear wove through her awe, the old whisper insisting she was not enough, that a simple lore keeper could never bear such a burden. She could still step back, leave the stone where it rested, and retreat into the quiet of her old life. But the memory of the children laughing in the Glade's pools, of the families gathered in their fading village, rose up within her. Her fear was real, but her purpose was stronger. With a final, steadying breath, Lyra made her choice. She accepted the mantle, not as a hero from a tale, but as herself, vowing silently to protect this light and use it to restore the balance that had been lost. The stone's glow stabilized, humming with a new, settled power, but her decision had consequences. The brilliant flare had been a beacon in the gloom. From the mist-shrouded entrance to the sanctuary, dark, shifting forms began to coalesce, their silent attention fixed on the light within. Just as the first tendrils of shadow began to creep across the threshold, a soft grating sound came from behind the pedestal. A section of the wall slid away, revealing a narrow, descending passage hidden in the stone, its darkness a promise of escape rather than an end. The tunnel was a tight, winding ascent of rough-hewn stone. Lyra ran, the Sunstone held before her like a shield, its light pushing back against the clawing shadows that swarmed at the edges of its glow. A chilling silence pursued her, broken only by the frantic rhythm of her own breathing and the skittering sounds of dark forms testing the boundaries of her radiance. Each time a tendril of darkness dared to touch the light, it recoiled with a sharp hiss, but the pressure never lessened. The shadow was no longer a passive gloom. It was a conscious, hunting force, and its desperation to reclaim the stone was a palpable force against her back. She felt the weight of the relic in her hands, not a physical burden, but the immense gravity of the hope she now carried for her entire world. Trusting the path was her only option. She did not look back, did not hesitate at the forks that occasionally appeared, simply following the strongest pull of the Sunstone's gentle warmth. It was a pure act of faith, a surrender to the very light she was sworn to protect. Then came a low, grinding rumble from deep within the mountain. The tunnel behind her shuddered, and with a roar of falling stone, a section of the ceiling gave way, sealing the path she had come from. The shadow, thwarted in its direct pursuit, was now trying to trap her. The immediate, physical danger was terrifyingly real, the dust choking and the thunder of rock, a deafening drumbeat urging her forward. She ran faster, the light from the stone bouncing wildly off the narrowing walls, her heart hammering a single, relentless message. Go, go, go. Just as the rumbling seemed to close in from all sides, the tunnel angled sharply upward and ended at a curtain of thick, hanging vines. She burst through them, stumbling out into the cool, open air of a high mountain ledge. The sudden silence was staggering. Below her, the land was still shrouded in deep night, but when she lifted her gaze to the horizon, she saw it. A thin, brilliant line of gold and rose was beginning to bleed into the edge of the world, the first, undeniable hint of the coming dawn. The climb was a demanding test of strength and will. Lyra hauled herself up the steep mountainside, her fingers raw and aching as they sought purchase on cold, sharp rock. The Sunstone, secured in a pouch at her belt, cast a warm, guiding glow that illuminated the faintest cracks and handholds, revealing a path where none seemed to exist. Each upward pull was a struggle against the thin, biting air and the deep weariness that threatened to settle into her bones. Far below, the shadow's frustration echoed against the stone in a chorus of sharp cries, a sound that tested her focus. They were regrouping, their calls a signal of renewed pursuit. She could not afford to pause, not even for a moment. Her decision was a simple, constant thought in her mind: keep moving. The summit was not just a destination. It was the only place high enough, the only platform from which the stone's light could truly reach the world. The urgency grew with every foot of elevation she gained. Dark, agile shapes began to swarm up the cliff face behind her, moving with an unnatural, fluid grace. They were faster than the formless tendrils, a specialized vanguard sent to intercept her before she could complete her task. This was the final chase, a determined race against the closing darkness. Her breath came in ragged clouds, her muscles burning in protest, but the sight of the brightening horizon fueled her resolve. With one last, tremendous effort, she dragged herself over a final ledge and onto a wide, flat expanse. The wind here was clean and sharp. Before her, bathed in the first direct rays of the rising sun, was a circular stone dais, its surface etched with deep, intricate runes that seemed to welcome the dawn light. This was the place. The stone dais hummed beneath her feet, its ancient runes drinking in the first golden rays of dawn. With a steady hand she did not feel, Lyra placed the Sunstone onto the central rune, its surface warming instantly at the contact. Closing her eyes, she began to speak the words of the prophecy, the phrases she had memorized from the Watchtower mosaic, now flowing from her not as a recitation, but as a plea and a command woven together. She poured every ounce of her will into the stone, her voice a fragile thread against the growing wind. The Sunstone responded, its glow intensifying as it drew power from the rising sun, growing from a gentle lantern into a brilliant, contained star that pushed the clinging shadows back from the mountaintop. But the shadow would not yield so easily. A furious windstorm erupted around the peak, howling with voices of doubt and despair. Illusions flickered at the edges of her vision, showing her the village falling into permanent night, the hopeful faces of children fading into gloom. Each vision was a hammer blow against her concentration, a desperate attempt to shatter her focus and extinguish the light at its moment of rebirth. The choice was stark and immediate: She could not fight the illusions, so she would replace them, blocking out the screaming wind and the terrifying images. Lyra closed her eyes tighter and turned inward. She grasped for the memory of laughter in the sun-dappled glade, the warmth of a family hearth, the simple, steadfast hope in the elder's eyes. She built a fortress in her mind, not of stone, but of these positive, luminous moments, using the joy they sparked within her to fuel the ritual's sacred fire. The fate of every sunrise to come rested on this single act of mental defiance. As the ritual reached its crescendo and the Sunstone blazed with the power of a newborn dawn, the scattered shadows on the mountain swirled together. The formless gloom coalesced, drawing itself up into a single, towering figure of absolute darkness, a silent giant of night that prepared for one final, overwhelming assault. The giant of night lunged, a tidal wave of silent cold and absolute blackness that crashed against the brilliant aura of the Sunstone. Lyra stood firm within the circle of light, her arms outstretched, the stone blazing in her hands. The impact was not physical, but a deep pressure against her spirit, a weight that sought to quiet her hope as easily as a candle flame. The shadow had no voice, yet its message was deafening, a psychic whisper of endings, of futility, of a universe that felt cold and empty. It showed her visions of the light fading, of the dawn she had fought so hard to reach being lost forever, suggesting that her struggle was without meaning. This was the shadow's final argument, an offer of the quiet peace that comes with letting go. For a terrifying moment, the cold seeped into her bones, and the weight of that feeling seemed like a truth she had always known. She could meet its force with her own. She could answer darkness with a desperate, furious light. But a memory surfaced, clear and warm amidst the storm, the gentle guidance of the hopeful whispers in the cavern. They had not spoken of destruction, but of renewal. In that instant, she understood the true nature of the choice before her. This was not a conflict to be won by force, but a balance to be restored through an act of profound conviction. She made her decision. She would not answer the shadow with its own tools of fear and anger. Instead, she would answer its silence with a song. Closing her eyes, she poured every memory of warmth, every moment of joy from the glade, every fragile dream of her village, into the light she held. She began to speak, her voice a soft but unwavering counterpoint to the shadow's presence. She did not shout words of defiance, but whispered words of welcome, speaking of dawns that always return, of seeds that rest in the winter ground only to awaken in spring, of the simple, enduring strength found in a shared story or a helping hand. She offered the shadow not a battle, but an invitation to remember what it was like before the world was divided. Her compassion was a response the entity could not comprehend. Its form rippled, the crushing pressure faltering for a heartbeat. Stirred by this unexpected answer, the shadow gathered itself for one last, overwhelming surge, its darkness condensing into a spear of pure negation aimed directly at her heart. But it was too late. The sun crested the horizon. A flood of raw, golden light washed over the mountaintop, and the Sunstone in Lyra's hands erupted, drinking in the power of the new day. The brilliant pulse did not attack the shadow. It simply existed, so full and complete that there was no room left for the darkness. The towering entity let out a final, piercing cry that fractured into 1,000 fading echoes, its form unraveling into harmless, shimmering mist that was gently lifted away by the warm, gentle light of morning. Silence returned, deep and whole. The howling wind stilled, and the last of the clinging gloom vanished. Lyra stood alone on the dais, bathed in the quiet, golden radiance of a world restored. Warmth returned to the world in a slow, golden wave. Lyra watched from the summit as the light flowed into the valleys and forests below, the last remnants of the unnatural gloom dissolving like mist under a summer sun. Colors she had almost forgotten seemed to awaken, the deep green of the pine forests and the rich brown of the distant plains emerging from the gray. The air itself tasted different, clean, and full of the promise of growth. A profound quiet settled over the mountain, the kind that follows a great storm, leaving only the gentle whisper of a new day. The immediate threat had passed, and the ancient balance between light and shadow was, for this moment, perfectly restored. Yet a quiet unease lingered within her, a question that had no simple answer. Had she truly done enough, or was this peace merely a pause in a cycle far older than she was? The weight of the Sunstone in her hands was no longer a burden of fear, but a responsibility of care. Her old life as a simple lore keeper felt like a story about someone else, a role she had outgrown the moment she chose to step onto the Bridge of Shadows. She understood now that the quest was not the end of her purpose, but its true beginning. The world would need someone to remember, to watch for the subtle shifts, and to keep the knowledge of the light safe for the generations to come. With a calm certainty that felt like destiny, she made her choice. She would remain the keeper of the dawn. Her path would now be one of preservation and guidance, a quiet guardian, ensuring that the light she had fought so hard to reclaim would never be taken for granted. The world was safe, but it was also changed, and so was she. True safety was not the absence of shadow, but the constant, gentle work of nurturing the light. As she began her descent, the mountain path seemed less treacherous, the stones warmed by the sun, and there, nestled in the embrace of the awakening land, she saw her village. Its windows glittered in the morning light, and the thin, hopeful threads of hearth smoke rose into a clear blue sky. It was no longer a place fading into memory, but a community glowing with renewed life, calling its keeper home. The journey home was a different kind of quest. Lyra walked familiar paths, now bathed in warm sunlight, the Sunstone a gentle weight against her side. Where small, stubborn patches of shadow still clung to the roots of ancient trees, or deep within rocky hollows, she did not pass them by. She would pause, drawing the stone from its pouch, and a soft, focused beam of light would flow from her hands. The darkness did not vanish with a hiss of defeat, but rather unwound like a tight knot, the ground beneath it seeming to breathe a sigh of relief as healthy green shoots pushed through the soil. She was not fighting anymore, she was healing, and each small act of restoration felt as significant as her stand on the mountain peak. Word of her return traveled faster than her own footsteps. She crested the final hill to see the entire village gathered at its edge, their faces turned upward, illuminated not by desperation, but by a joy so profound it brought tears to her eyes. There were no grand speeches, no demands for a heroic tale. They simply welcomed her home, their relief a tangible warmth that surrounded her. In the days that followed, she found herself sharing her journey not as an epic, but as a series of quiet lessons. She spoke of the value of a steady breath in a chaotic place, the strength found in a happy memory, and the quiet courage of trusting a small light in a vast darkness. Her stories were not just about her, they were a new kind of map for others to follow. Yet, settling back into the rhythm of village life brought its own subtle challenges. Where she had once been a Lyra the lore keeper, she was now looked upon with a mixture of reverence and expectation. People sought her counsel on matters far beyond old tales, and she felt the weight of their hope, a constant, gentle pressure. The internal shift was the true adjustment. The woman who had trembled at the edge of the whispering woods was gone, replaced by someone who understood the nature of shadows. But the echo of that feeling sometimes visited her in quiet moments. She had to learn to carry her new role without it becoming a wall between her and the community she loved. Her most important decision took root one afternoon, watching the village children play in the long, golden light of the setting sun. She gathered them, not as a distant figure of legend, but as a storyteller under the great oak at the village center. There, she began to teach them the old songs her grandmother had sung, the very melodies that had guided her through the Valley of Echoes. She showed them how to trace the constellations that told the story of the first dawn, and shared the simple fables where kindness outsmarted fear. This was not mere child care, it was the careful planting of seeds. She was building a legacy of awareness, ensuring that the knowledge of the light would not be lost again, but would live and grow in a new generation. The stakes had transformed. The immediate danger was gone, but the work of prevention had just begun. It was a quieter, more persistent effort, strengthening the community's heart against the subtle creep of despair or forgetfulness. True safety, she now knew, was not a fortress, but a garden that required constant, gentle tending. As evening settled, she often found herself walking to the hilltop, overlooking the village. She would watch the world settle into dusk, the long shadows of the trees stretching across the fields, and feel no fear. The dance between light and dark was the natural order of things, a beautiful, necessary balance. From this vantage point, she could see the gentle glow of hearth fires being lit one by one in the homes below, each one a tiny, defiant star against the coming night, and a quiet promise that the dawn would always be worth the wait. The old storyteller's cottage at the edge of the village became something new. Lyra spent her days transforming it, filling the space with the scent of old paper and drying herbs. She called it the Dawn House, a quiet library and meeting place where she carefully recorded every detail of her journey, the prophecy from the Watchtower mosaic, and the subtle nature of the light she now served. It was not a grand fortress, but a living archive, its windows always open to the morning sun. Soon, the simple cottage became a quiet magnet. Travelers seeking wisdom, farmers curious about the strange new resilience of their crops, and parents with children who asked too many questions about the stars all found their way to her door. The village, once a quiet point on the map, began to hum with a new energy, its people feeling more connected to the magic woven through their world than they had in generations. Yet for Lyra, this role carried a unique kind of solitude. She was the sole bearer of a profound understanding, and the weight of that knowledge could sometimes feel like a wall between her and the very community she was helping to build. The feeling was most acute in the deep quiet of the evening, when the last visitor had departed, and the shadows in the corners of the Dawn House seemed to hold the echoes of a responsibility that was hers alone. It was in one of these moments that a young girl named Lyra no more than 12 years old, lingered after a storytelling. While the other children had been captivated by the adventure, Lyra had been quietly tracing the symbol of the Sunstone Lyra had drawn on a slate, her small fingers causing a faint, golden shimmer to dance across the surface. The sight struck Lyra with the force of a long-forgotten truth. The light was not meant to be a solitary flame, but a constellation. Her decision was immediate and clear. She asked Lyra's family if she could mentor the girl, not as a replacement, but as a partner in the vigil. This simple choice changed everything. By sharing the knowledge and the gentle exercises to sense and shape light, Lyra was not diminishing her own purpose. She was planting a garden where before there had been only a single, magnificent tree. The power and the profound responsibility were now distributed, creating a network of guardians. If the shadow ever sought to target a single keeper again, it would find its path blocked by many small, interwoven lights, a defense far stronger than any one person could ever maintain. As the seasons turned, the lessons of the Dawn House became woven into the fabric of daily life. Children learned that the evening shadows were not something to fear, but a natural part of the world's beautiful rhythm, a time for rest and reflection before the sun's return. The world itself seemed to breathe a sigh of relief, settling into an era of peace built not on the absence of darkness, but on a widespread and deeply understood respect for the balance. The first festival of lights transformed the village common into a sea of gentle radiance. On a night that would have once been shrouded in quiet stillness, every windowsill held a candle, and paper lanterns bobbed like captured stars above the heads of laughing children. At the center of it all stood Lyra, the sunstone cradled in her hands. As she approached the great unlit bonfire, a hush fell over the crowd, a collective breath held in anticipation. She did not speak a grand incantation. Instead, she simply pressed the warm relic against the stacked wood, and a flame of pure, white light bloomed from its heart. It did not roar or crackle with aggression, but burned with a silent, steady intensity that cast no harsh shadows, only a comforting, pervasive glow. The light itself felt ancient and kind, a tangible memory of the dawn she had fought to reclaim. This was no ordinary fire. It was a beacon of remembrance, and its enduring flame would be kept alive throughout the night by the villagers themselves, each taking a turn to tend it. As music swelled and the celebration began in earnest, Lyra watched families and friends join hands, their faces illuminated by the gentle, magical light. The festival was more than a party. It was a living ritual, weaving the community into a single, stronger tapestry. Their shared laughter and stories under the safe, starlit sky were a powerful magic of their own, a declaration that the long silence had been broken forever. When the time came for her to address the gathering, Lyra felt the familiar weight of their gazes. But instead of offering a polished tale of heroic deeds, she made a different choice. She spoke of her uncertainty in the whispering woods, of the doubt that had gripped her on the bridge of shadows, and of the moment in the cavern when she had almost given in to weariness. Her voice was quiet, but it carried through the clear night air. She shared not her victories, but her vulnerabilities, revealing the shaky foundation upon which her courage had been built. By acknowledging her own struggles, she did not diminish her achievement. She made the light she carried feel accessible to everyone listening. Her story became a map of resilience, showing that true strength is not the absence of fear, but the choice to take one more step forward in spite of it. This honesty forged a deeper connection than any legend ever could, transforming her from a distant figure into a relatable guide. The success of the festival cemented its place in the life of the community, ensuring it would be repeated with each passing year. This tradition was the final, crucial step in her guardianship, embedding the values of her quest, courage, hope, and perseverance, directly into the culture's heart. The story was no longer just hers to protect. It belonged to every person who would ever gather around that blessed flame. As the night deepened and the melodies softened, the festival slowly wound down. Lyra stood for a long while, watching the central fire burn with its untroubled, pure light. A profound and quiet fulfillment settled within her, a feeling not of a journey ended, but of a purpose beautifully begun. The future of guardianship stretched out before her, no longer a solitary vigil, but a shared promise passed from hand to hand, its light reflected in the eyes of an entire community, pledged to remember. The soil was cool and rich between her fingers as Lyra tended the evening blossoms in her garden. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves, carrying the scent of damp earth and night flowers, and within that rustle, a voice formed. It was not a sound that traveled to her ears, but one that settled directly in her mind, soft and clear like a forgotten melody. It was a whisper of gratitude, a familiar presence from the deep Cavern of Whispers, thanking her for her steadfast heart. The light will always have its guides, it breathed into her spirit, a promise that felt as ancient and true as the stars themselves. This was no echo of the past, but a living thread of the world's magic, acknowledging that her actions had woven her permanently into the balance she had helped restore. A profound sense of connection washed over her, quieting the last lingering traces of solitude she had carried from the mountain. She was not a lone sentinel, but a single note in a vast, harmonious song. Yet, alongside the comfort came a quiet, questioning thought. Was this peaceful chapter a true ending, or merely a calm between greater cycles of challenge? The shadow was gone, but the nature of balance meant that stillness was always temporary. She felt a flicker of the old uncertainty, the lore keeper's mind seeking a final, definitive answer where none could exist. But she had learned too much to let that question become a fear. Instead, she made a conscious choice to accept the whisper, not as a final blessing, but as part of the ongoing rhythm, a gentle reminder that her work was part of something eternal. She decided then to listen to these subtle messages as guides for her daily life, letting them influence a kind word to a neighbor or the timing of a lesson for the children, integrating the magic into the ordinary. The whisper carried one final, thrilling implication. It spoke of other points of light stirring in distant lands, of new keepers awakening to their own roles in other times and other cultures. Her own journey had not been an isolated event, but a catalyst. The safety of the light no longer depended on a single flame, on a single mountain, but on a constellation of small, steady fires, each one reinforcing the others. That evening, as the last light faded from the sky, she sat with Lyra on the steps of the Dawn House. She did not begin with a lesson from a scroll. Instead, she looked at her young apprentice and said, "The wind spoke to me today." And in the telling of that simple, miraculous truth, a new chapter of their shared exploration began. The night sky was a deep, velvety canvas, scattered with diamond-bright stars. Lyra and Lyra climbed the familiar path to the hilltop, the only sounds their soft footfalls and the distant call of a night bird. At the summit, Lyra drew the Sunstone from its pouch, its daytime warmth now a gentle, sleeping hum. She did not command it, but instead held it up with a quiet request, a feeling of invitation sent from her heart into the smooth crystal. In response, the stone began to pulse with a soft, silvery light that reached up toward the heavens. The starlight itself seemed to gather and intensify, not into a blinding glare, but into a gentle, luminous mist that settled over the sleeping landscape. The fields and forests below were bathed in a soft, ethereal glow, revealing details usually lost to the night, a world seen through a veil of dreamlike clarity. This was not an act of power, but one of deep communion. For Lyra, standing beside her mentor, the experience was a silent lesson in feeling the interconnected threads of magic. She learned that true guardianship was as much about listening as it was about acting, about understanding the quiet language of the world. The ritual became a shared meditation, a time where words were unnecessary, and their bond to each other and to the cosmic balance deepened with every shared breath. In that profound peace, Lyra reflected on the long road from a fearful village to this moment of serene vigilance. The absence of conflict was not an end to their duty, but a measure of its success. She made a quiet decision then to make this starlit practice a regular part of their lives. It would be their anchor, a way to constantly recalibrate their senses to the subtle flows of light and the spaces between. This consistent attunement was their best defense, making them sensitive to the slightest tremor in the world's equilibrium, ready to respond long before any shadow could gain a foothold. As the enhanced starlight gradually faded and the Sunstone returned to its quiet state, they turned to descend. The village rested peacefully in the valley below, its windows dark, its people safe in untroubled sleep. Each quiet home was a silent testament to the harmony they worked so gently to maintain, a harmony woven from courage, memory, and the soft, watchful light of the stars. The dream began not as a vision, but as a feeling of walking through a world where the air itself was made of starlight. Lyra found herself on a path that shimmered underfoot, dividing two distinct realms. To her left stretched a land of pure, brilliant light, so intense it held no shape or depth, a beautiful but featureless expanse of radiance. To her right lay a realm of soft, gentle shadow, a tranquil twilight where forms were suggested but never fully revealed, a place of quiet mystery. Ancient spirits, their forms woven from memory and moonlight, greeted her not as a student, but as a fellow guardian. They did not speak in words, but in shared understandings that blossomed in her mind. They showed her how the deepest roots of a forest grow strong in the hidden, dark earth, and how the most vibrant flower closes its petals at night to gather strength for the dawn. They taught her that shadow is the quiet space where seeds rest and dreams are formed, the necessary contrast that gives light its meaning and value. It was not a force of opposition, but one half of a sacred partnership. The lingering worry she had carried since the bridge, the instinct to see any dimness as a threat, simply faded in the face of this deeper truth. Her challenge was not with shadow, but with a misunderstanding of its role in the great balance of things. She awoke with the first rays of the sun. The dream's clarity settled deep within her spirit. The world outside her window looked different. The long morning shadows cast by the hills no longer felt like a reminder of past difficulties, but like a natural blanket being gently drawn back. Her perspective had fundamentally shifted. She saw now that true harmony was not the removal of shadow, but the respectful acknowledgement of its place. That very morning, she unrolled a fresh piece of parchment and began to write. Her new scroll would not be a chronicle of struggles, but a philosophy of balance, explaining how rest defines action, how silence gives music its shape, and how the gentle night makes the morning sun a gift. She decided to weave this wisdom into every story she told the children, to reframe their understanding from the very beginning, by teaching the next generation to respect the shadow as part of life's natural rhythm. She was nurturing a more resilient peace. This shift in thinking was a deeper form of protection than any ward or barrier, addressing the source of future tension before worry could ever take hold. The gentle scratch of her quill was the only sound in the dawn house, a quiet promise that the greatest magic lay not in choosing light over dark, but in understanding the profound beauty of the space between them. The grove felt different this time, a welcoming warmth humming just beneath the soil. Lyra led Lyra to its heart, their steps silent on the mossy ground. She carried a small, silver acorn, its shell etched with runes of protection that pulsed with a soft, golden light. This was their gift, a seed nurtured by the Sunstone's own energy. Together, they knelt and made a small opening in the earth, their hands working in unison to place the acorn into the rich, dark soil. As Lyra covered it, she made her choice, pressing her palm flat against the ground and letting a single, brilliant thread of light flow from the sunstone into the waiting seed. It was not a loss of power, but an act of trust, a conscious decision to plant a new anchor for the light she was sworn to protect. The ground seemed to sigh with contentment, the ancient magic of the grove recognizing and embracing this new, living ward. The tree sprouted before their eyes, not with a sudden surge, but with a patient, deliberate grace. Its bark was smooth and pale, and when its leaves unfurled, they shimmered with a soft, internal luminescence, casting a gentle, moon-like glow across the clearing. This was no ordinary tree. It was a sanctuary, a living library of light where future generations could come to learn and reflect in perfect peace. By sharing the Sunstone's essence, Lyra had not weakened its core light, but had created a new, independent source of it. The balance of the world was no longer reliant on a single, central point, but was now supported by a growing network of resilient, interconnected lights. The grove itself seemed to breathe deeper, its colors more vibrant, its quiet more profound. As they turned to leave, a profound serenity followed them, a tangible peace that they carried back to the village like a gentle, sustaining melody. The observatory at the Dawn House became their nightly sanctuary, its open roof a window to the cosmos. Lyra and Lyra spent countless hours there, their faces bathed in the cool light of the stars as they meticulously tracked the slow, graceful dance of the constellations. They learned to read the subtle shifts in the sky's energy, noting how certain celestial alignments caused the light in the sunstone to pulse with a soft, rhythmic hum, while others brought a deep, contemplative quiet to the shadows in the forest. This was not mere stargazing. It was a language, a way of understanding the great, breathing rhythm of their world. They recorded every nuance on a vast, blank parchment, their quills tracing lines of silver and gold to create a living document they called the Luminous Atlas. The project demanded immense patience, as a single misread star could throw off their predictions for an entire season, but the quiet, focused work was its own reward, weaving a deeper connection between them and the heavens. Lyra made the conscious choice to treat this not as a secret to be guarded, but as a gift to be shared. Once the atlas was complete, she and Lyra presented it to the village council, explaining how it could predict the natural ebb and flow of magical energy. The farmers used it to know the best times for planting seeds that needed extra light. The weavers learned which nights yielded thread that shimmered with a subtle glow, and the entire community could prepare for the rare celestial events that brought deeper shadows, understanding them as a natural part of the cycle rather than a threat. This knowledge transformed anxiety into anticipation, empowering the village to work in harmony with the world's rhythms. Seeing the profound benefit, Lyra decided to extend this wisdom beyond their own borders. She and Lyra began creating copies of the most crucial sections of the Atlas, rolling the delicate scrolls with care. Their plan was to embark on a journey, carrying these maps to the neighboring hamlets and the distant settlements they knew only from travelers' tales. This act of sharing was a strategic decision, a way to weave a wider net of awareness and cooperation across the land. A region filled with communities that understood the balance would be far more resilient than any single village, no matter how well prepared. With the maps carefully packed and the path ahead clear in their minds, they felt a quiet excitement for the connections they would forge and the other keepers they might meet. Their journey began along a winding river path. The star map rolled securely in Lyra's pack. The first village they approached was nestled in a high valley, its people quiet and reserved, their trust earned not through words, but through patient observation. When an elder voiced doubt, suggesting their celestial maps were just pretty stories, Lyra did not argue. Instead, she asked to see their sacred grove, a place where the trees grew in a perfect circle. Under the twilight sky, with the villagers gathered, she and Lyra simply held the Sunstone aloft. Its light, gentle and inviting, caused the unique moss covering the ancient stones at the grove's center to awaken with a soft, blue luminescence, a reaction the villagers had only ever seen in their oldest legends. The silent demonstration spoke louder than any lecture, transforming skepticism into wondering acceptance. Lyra quickly realized that a single, rigid approach would fail. In the next settlement, a community of renowned weavers, she wove their teachings into the local craft. She showed them how the threads of light and shadow in their tapestries mirrored the cosmic balance on her star map, and they, in turn, taught her songs that charted the seasons through the loom's rhythm. Every village had its own wisdom, its own piece of the puzzle. A community of stonemasons shared tales of rocks that held the memory of sunlight, while fishermen spoke of reading the moon's pull on the tides as easily as reading a book. Lyra made the conscious choice to listen as much as she taught, adapting her message to honor each culture's unique relationship with the world. These exchanges were not one-sided gifts. They were a mutual enrichment, weaving a tapestry of shared knowledge that stretched far beyond their own borders. The alliances they forged were not military pacts, but bonds of understanding, a network of communities now connected by a common language of balance. This distribution of knowledge was a profound strategic shift. The safety of the light no longer hinged on a single keeper or a single relic. in a mountain sanctuary. It was now a shared responsibility, a collective resilience where the fading of one light would be met by the brightening of many others. The weight Lyra had carried since the summit felt lighter, shared across countless willing hands and watchful eyes. When they finally returned home, their packs were heavier not with goods, but with scrolls of new songs, sketches of unfamiliar constellations, and the profound stories of their neighbors. The Dawn House now echoed with a chorus of diverse voices, its wisdom expanded and its purpose reaffirmed. Their own village traditions were enriched, their festival of lights now incorporating melodies from the weavers and stories from the masons, creating a celebration that was truly a reflection of a united, harmonious world. The old storyteller's cottage could no longer contain the growing number of students. Lyra chose a sunlit meadow at the village edge, and with the community's help, they raised a simple, open-air school they called the Garden of Dawn. Here, she and Lyra taught classes not just to children, but to anyone with a curious heart. They wove together history and magic, explaining how the Great Balance was not a distant legend, but a living principle that influenced the growth of their crops and the calm of their nights. The challenge was not in finding willing minds, but in crafting lessons that resonated with every age. For the youngest, they used songs about the sun and moon being friends who took turns watching the world. For the elders, they discussed the subtle ways memory itself could be a form of light, preserving warmth against the cool passage of time. The school became the new heart of the community, a place where the blacksmith learned why his fire burned brighter on certain days, and where farmers understood the quiet importance of letting fields rest under the starlight. Lyra made one foundational rule for every class, a requirement that every student, regardless of age, also learn about the constructive gifts of shadow. She taught them how the deep, quiet dark of winter gives the earth its rest, how the soft shade of a forest canopy protects young saplings, and how the privacy of a shadowed corner allows for quiet thought and personal growth. This was a conscious decision to prevent a new kind of misunderstanding, one that might shy away from all dimness instead of understanding its role. She wanted to build a resilience founded on wisdom, not on a simplistic division of light good and dark bad. The stakes for this education were profoundly long-term. By embedding these principles so deeply into the culture, she was nurturing the future against the kind of fearful thinking that could one day seek to erase all shadow, a pursuit just as unwise as the endless night she had faced. This was her lasting legacy, not carved in stone, but woven into the very fabric of thought for generations to come. In the quiet lulls between lessons, Lyra would often step back and simply watch. She saw Lyra patiently guiding a small child's hand to trace the symbol of the Sunstone in the sand, and she saw groups of teenagers debating the ethics of a story about a keeper who tried to use light for control. In those eager, engaged faces, she saw her own journey reflected and multiplied. 1,000 small lights, now understanding their place in a vast, beautiful, and balanced world. The fire in her hearth cast a warm, dancing light across the room, its gentle crackle the only sound in the quiet of the evening. Lyra sat surrounded by the scrolls she had written, the luminous atlas open beside her personal journals. Her fingers traced the familiar lines of ink, each word a stepping stone on the path that had led her from a questioning village to this moment of profound stillness. Reviewing the maps and the stories, She felt the weight of her journey, not as a burden, but as a deep and settled accomplishment. The quiet thoughts that had once followed her were now just distant memories, completely overshadowed by the gentle rhythm of a life lived in purposeful service. Her work had taken root in the world, and it would continue to grow through Lyra and all the students in the Garden of Dawn. This quiet reflection solidified a contentment she had never known was possible, a confirmation that her choices had woven a lasting meaning into the fabric of her days. With a calm certainty, she reached for a fresh piece of parchment and a pot of deep blue ink. She decided to write one final scroll, not a historical record or a philosophical text, but a personal letter addressed directly to the future keepers who would one day walk the path after her. She wrote of the courage found in small, consistent steps, of the strength that blooms from shared knowledge, and the importance of listening to the world's quiet songs. She assured them that feeling uncertain did not make them unworthy, and that true guardianship was as much about tending the heart as it was about understanding the stars. This act was her way of ensuring that her most personal wisdom, the insights born from experience and quiet joy, would be preserved with a heartfelt dimension that factual lore could never capture alone. As she finished the final sentence, she carefully rolled the parchment and sealed it with a drop of wax, pressing the symbol of the Sunstone into its warm surface. The fire crackled softly, as if in approval, and she looked toward the window where the first stars were beginning to appear. A light heart filled her as she thought of tomorrow's lessons, ready to greet the new day and the new keepers it would bring. The idea for the shrine began as a quiet suggestion during a village council meeting, a simple proposal to build a permanent home for the Sunstone. What followed was a beautiful outpouring of collective effort, with every family bringing their unique skills to the task. The stonemasons shaped the smooth, white quartz for the central pedestal. The weavers crafted delicate tapestries depicting the constellations, and the carvers filled the wooden archways with scenes of hope and renewal. The entire community, from the eldest elder to the youngest child, found a way to contribute, laying each stone and beam with a sense of shared purpose. At the heart of it all, they built a small, crystal chamber where the Sunstone would rest, and from its gentle glow, they kindled a single, unwavering flame that would never be allowed to go out. This eternal fire was not just a symbol, it was a living promise, a testament to the enduring presence of light and hope in their world. Soon, word of the peaceful sanctuary traveled far beyond their valley, carried by traders and travelers. The shrine became a quiet pilgrimage site for those seeking guidance or a moment of solace. People would come from distant lands to sit in the gentle radiance of the flame, finding comfort in its constant, warm presence. It served as a physical anchor for the principles of balance, a place where anyone could remember that even the smallest light can hold back the deepest night. On the day the shrine was consecrated, with the entire community gathered in a silent, joyful circle, Lyra made a profound decision. She placed the Sunstone upon its pedestal, and then, with a calm heart, she took a deliberate step back. She chose to let the community take primary care of the shrine, entrusting its daily tending to a rotating group of volunteers. This act symbolized that the light was no longer her solitary burden, but a shared treasure that now belonged to everyone. Its safety was no longer the task of a single keeper, but the cherished responsibility of an entire culture. This communal ownership wove the light directly into the fabric of their daily lives, making it stronger and more resilient than any single guardian could ever hope to be. One evening at dusk, Lyra stood alone before the flickering eternal flame. The air was still, filled only with the soft scent of night-blooming flowers and the distant, happy sounds of the village settling in for the evening. In that quiet moment, she felt the story of her life come full circle. The solitary quest that had begun with so much fear and uncertainty had blossomed into this, a shared guardianship that would echo through generations. The flame before her was not just a fire, but the living heart of a community, a quiet, steady light against the coming stars. The first unseasonal chill arrived not with a whisper, but with a sudden, heavy gloom that smothered the afternoon sun. Shadows, which usually stretched long and gentle, now pooled thick and cold around the village homes, and a deep, unnatural silence fell. This was not the shadow Lyra had faced on the mountain, but a new, creeping weariness that threatened to extinguish hope itself. The eternal flame at the shrine flickered, its light straining against the oppressive air. Lyra knew this was a different kind of test, one that could not be met by a single keeper, no matter how strong. Standing before the gathered, anxious villagers, she did not lift the Sunstone in solitary defiance. Instead, she turned to them, her voice calm but clear. "Our light is not just in this stone," she said. "It is in us, in our shared memory of brighter days and our common hope for tomorrow." She asked them to join hands, to form a circle around the shrine, and to focus not on fear, but on the simple, powerful feeling of hope. One by one, they linked hands, a chain of shared strength. A farmer thought of the first green shoot breaking through the soil. A weaver remembered the warmth of a finished blanket given to a newborn. A child held the memory of laughter in the sun-dappled glade. These were not grand thoughts, but they were real, and they were shared. As the collective will of the community focused on the flame, a gentle hum began to emanate from the Sunstone. Then it flared. A wave of pure, brilliant light erupted from the shrine, not a weapon to destroy the gloom, but a radiant, intelligent web that flowed over every home, every field, and every path. It did not erase the shadows, but wove itself around them, integrating the natural darkness into its design, creating a balanced, shimmering barrier that pulsed with the rhythm of their collective heartbeat. The unnatural chill lifted, replaced by a profound, lasting warmth. The village was not just protected, it was harmonized, its safety now a living testament to the power of unity. Lyra watched, her journey from a lone seeker to a unifier finally complete. She had carried the spark, but it was the community that had built the enduring fire. The village thrived not in spite of shadow, but because of it, its people understanding the quiet necessity of both dusk and dawn. Lyra, her hair now the color of moonlight, watched from her favorite bench in the Garden of Dawn as Lyra led a class of young students. Her apprentice's voice, once shy and questioning, now carried the calm authority of experience, explaining how the long winter nights gave the earth a chance to dream of spring. The children listened, their faces reflecting not just understanding, but a deep, inherent respect for the rhythm of their world. Seeing Lyra guide the next generation, and the generation after that beginning to teach their own small lessons, filled Lyra with a quiet certainty that the legacy of light was no longer a solitary flame to be guarded, but a self-sustaining garden. The world was in good hands, hands that had learned to both hold the light and appreciate the restful dark. Her own purpose felt complete, a story that had been fully told and then lovingly passed on for others to continue. She remained a watchful presence, of course, her senses attuned to the subtle flows of magic, but the weight of vigilance had been transformed into the lightheartedness of shared stewardship. One evening, she walked to the hilltop, overlooking the village, the path as familiar as the beat of her own heart. She sat on the soft grass and watched as the sun began its slow descent. The sky transformed into a breathtaking canvas of deep orange, soft purple, and the last brilliant streaks of gold, each color blending seamlessly with the advancing twilight. The fire of day and the shadow of night embraced in a spectacular display of harmony, a daily reminder of the beautiful balance she had helped the world remember. In that perfect, peaceful moment, watching the gentle lights of the village begin to twinkle below like earthbound stars, Lyra's heart was full. Her long journey had found its true and final home, not in an ending, but in this everlasting, serene beginning.